So today we're talking about spinning some art and textured yarns with a wheel that doesn't have the really large, super large orifice or the super large bobbins. You know, some people don't think they can't spin something too very textured with a regular wheel. And you know, some wheels will give you difficulty, particularly here along where the hooks are. A lot of texture, if there's a lot of stuff sticking out, sometimes that'll catch, and you have to be a little careful. So I'm going to measure the orifice here. Let's see, let's do it this way. I'm going to do it here to here. This orifice is about, it's a little bigger than a 1/2 inch. Now, this happens to be a Louette. Some of the Louette orifices are actually a 1/2 inch. Just slightly smaller. This one is just a shade larger, but not by a lot. And you can get quite a lot through the orifice to give yourself a textured spin, if that's what you're looking for, without having a lot of difficulty. As I say, I think more of the trouble I find sometimes is the catching on the little hooks, but you can deal with that. So let's play around a little bit with this. I'm just going to grab a handful of some lightly rinsed blocks. These are probably Teeswater. This is from, from my flock. And these are lightly rinsed. You could use Wensleydale just as nicely. And this is sort of just a traditional lock spin that I'm doing here. Let's get rid of that. If you know how to lock spin, if you've never done any lock spinning, we do have some videos for that at Shepherd's Talk. But you can see here, you can get quite a lot of texture down into your yarn using just locks and a fairly small orifice. You could leave some pieces out as though you were going to do a little tail spinning. It's really all in watching, preparing your fiber a little bit, getting enough twist for what you're looking for so that your yarn holds together, and then just keeping an eye on what you're spinning in there and playing around with it a little bit. You know, if you're giving enough twist here, you'll have plenty of twist to be able to play around. Ugh. So I have my wheel set to put quite a little bit of twist in. I don't want to get down too terribly thin without getting quite a bit of twist in here. I want this to hold together. Now, of course, you also have to think about, is this something you're going to ply? If this was going to be a single, I would not be spinning it with this much twist. This I'm going to plan to ply. So, you know, 2 considerations when you're doing this on a smaller orifice or a smaller bobbin. You certainly want to leave yourself room to be able to ply. Realizing, of course, you're going to have double the width going through that orifice. And certainly with this kind of a width, there's no problem with that whatsoever. I could probably 3-ply this pretty easily and not have any issues. But you do want to just keep that in mind. Don't get your spin so thick that you're barely getting through the orifice with a single if you want to ply it, because you're going to have trouble. Now, I'm using a pretty short fiber, short stapled fiber. This particular fleece has some locks that are only between 2 and 3 inches long, so it is harder. You have to be a little more careful that you're getting a good variety of fiber going in, and you don't get down to just the end of a little bit of staple where it might have a tendency to break. So you have to pay attention a little bit more. Maybe for your first time doing this, you'd want, playing around with a smaller orifice, you'd want a little longer staple, which you can certainly find very, very easily. Okay, so that's a lock spun. And you can see this will be very easy to either ply on itself or apply with a thread, and it'll go through the orifice without any difficulty at all. And you know, as you can see here, I'm really not having any trouble with the hooks at the moment either. Now I'm not putting a huge amount of texture in here, but we certainly would call this a textured yarn. We're just being a little more careful about the prep. Basically the draft, you know, you're drafting down a little bit extra as you're leaving that. You could play around with different types of spins with this. And, you know, some people actually prefer a slightly thinner, more conservative art yarn or lock spun yarn. Or if you have a project in mind that you don't want to get super bulky, nope, no problem whatsoever. Just spin your lock spun down a little bit so that your diameter is more narrow. So I'll show you what this looks like once it's plied, but let's go on to some other different ways you could get some texture into a small orifice. Alright, here I've grabbed some mohair, woolen mohair blend, mainly so that you can see what's going on here. Wanted to be able to get a color that would show up so you could see what's happening. You know, when you core spin, if you use something with a lot of grip, like this, it will really hold on to your fiber. Now you can core spin this way so that it's very smooth, but you also can core spin with lots of texture. No reason why you can't get a lot of texture into your core spun. See, and that's certainly a lot of texture there. It's all in just relaxing a little bit, watching your fiber, deciding if you like the way it's wrapping on. You know, you can sometimes come back a little bit with it and give it a little extra texture. You can let some of it dangle and get a little extra texture. There's quite a bit of texture going on to this core spun. Now, you can ply this. You could ply this. This is fairly easy to show what it would be like if it was plied on itself. Okay, there you go. Okay, now the plying on itself, this will probably catch a little bit. That's a little bit thick. So, since we're trying to get a little thinner here, let's grab some more fiber. Let's see if we can get something down. Again, let's get this pulling in a little more. There, let's get that right out of my way. Okay, so maybe that was too thick for your smaller orifice for this core spun. So here I'm going to spin it down thinner. Okay. Plenty of time, taking your time, allowing this to wrap a little bit, giving a little bit of texture there. You can hold it with your hand a little bit if you want to. Pull out just little bits of texture. Now see, that gives a very wispy, light, almost an auto wrap look to this, because I'm really letting that, see how delicate that is? You know, that I'm letting that wrap on itself. Now, if I was going to ply that on itself, I'd want just a little more twist in there, but that would be lovely. And that should have no trouble going through your orifice. You know, that's absolutely fine. Let's see, we could also do, you know, you could do a stack. I'm trying to think. I don't particularly want to do a coil. Well, I could try. Coil is going to be a little harder to do with this textured yarn, but we're going to try. I mean, with this textured core. Yuck. Okay, so if this is going to be coiled, I'll just keep spinning it and pushing it up. Okay, like this. Can you see that? Push it up. Wrap it around, push it up. Wrap it around, push it up. Whoop. Here's a piece of vegetable matter. I don't want that in my finished yarn. Sorry. And that's from my own flock. Uh-oh. You can certainly pull little bits out as you go. That's not a big issue. So again, we're trying to keep this coverage fairly fine. Problem there. Trying to keep this coverage fairly fine, but we are going to stack it a bit. Push it up. Push it up. Push it up. Just catch a few hairs in here. Just enough. Push it up. Draft it out a little bit. Push it up a little. Get some different textures going. That looks kind of like a little beehive. So now what I've done, another little trick you can use if you have a narrow orifice and you want to do a textured yarn, is do your texture, add your texture when you're plying. You could, now I have two different color, ply threads here. You can obviously spin a single and do whatever you like with it. But this way, when you add your texture, you know that it will fit through the orifice, because that's, once it goes through, you're all set. So we're going to ply these. Just going to kind of get started here, and I'm going to add some texture like this. See, that's kind of a big fuzzy pop. You can add your texture several ways when you're plying. You can treat it as though like your core spinning and sort of wrap. You can take a lock, and as you're spinning, you can drop it in and then lock it on. So take some locks here, I'm going to put it to the middle. Just let it catch as it wants to. There we go. You can play around with that. You can actually do some tail spinning. A lot of people prefer to tail spin when they're plying. Allow the tail to hang out. I'm just going to add this right in here, one on one side, and then let this dangle. Now if that was a longer piece, it would be a little more pronounced of a tail, but you get the idea. Do that again. Open up the tail end. Let's get some of this. Let's get some of this on. There. And then I'm just going to separate the lock on the lock up in one direction and in the other direction as I actually go ahead and spin this. Lock it right in there. Whoops. Let's go in the right direction. How about? There we go. Build up some twist. There's the lock. And that's in there pretty well. I kind of prefer, boy, now I've got too much tension. You know, when you're doing something like this, you really do want to take some time to play around with your tension, because it really can help you, obviously, with what you're trying to do, or it can hinder you. And here, let's pull this one out. Add a little more texture. Now, as I say, that you have total control over this, so you can add texture all the way along if that's what you're looking for. You know, if you're looking for something like this, you can add the texture with one or the other of your ply threads. You can treat your locks as though it were a third strand and hold it right in the middle and let that run through. That gives you a very different type of texture. As you can see, that's almost a wrap texture there. It folds it in as a 3-ply, like that. Gives you a lovely stripe in the color. You know, play around with that. As I say, if you prefer, you can swap hands and do more of a texture this way. Just pulling it out. There's some lovely texture there. And the nice part about this with a small orifice is you know that if it's going on and you're actually getting it onto your bobbin, you're good to go. You know, you don't have to spin it again. Now when it gets caught up here, you know, you'll notice if it gets caught up, you'll notice that things are not moving in and you have to stop and just untangle a little bit. Once in a while you'll also have to maybe stop and roll this onto your wheel. Alright, I'm just feeding that right onto my wheel and then starting at a new place. So all in all, you can get quite a bit of texture into your yarn's plying. It's just another way to go. Now another great way to add some texture if you're working with locks is to add them to your roving. Let's say you're spinning quite fine. I'm going to try to bring this down quite a bit smaller. You can spin some lovely texture in. You know, you just have to be careful about the amount of locks that you're adding. It wants to be sort of proportional to the width that you're spinning. You can spin quite a lot of texture in. And then bring this back down to a very, you can just keep that texture going. You're going to get a very different look. Okay, you can get the very poofy. If you wanted little locks in here, if you wanted this to show more curl, because it's such a finer spin, these locks won't work well for you because these locks are so big and curly. So let's see if we can grab a handful. Yeah. Okay, so now here I've chosen part of the fleece or some specific locks that have much smaller curl. So that smaller curl I'll be able to let hang out on this finer spin. The big curls, I'll show you again in a second. Let's get this roving attached and let's bring this down again to a fairly fine spin. Putting quite a bit of twist in. Now when I go to take a curl and add it into my spin, I'm going to get a very nice curl there, as you can see. And the definition of that curl is going to be pretty good. That's not what I'm looking for. This is what I'm looking for. I'm just going to take this with my roving and I'm going to kind of randomly allow that to come in. Okay? So here we go. I don't know why it makes me, these little curls make me want to talk very softly, which maybe is a good thing. I think sometimes I tend to talk a little too loud anyway. But something about these being little tiny, delicate curls that we're working with. We're going to put in here. Let's grab a couple more. Yep. The finer your spin, the thinner your thread or the yarn or the single that you're working with, the finer the curl you'd like it to be, because otherwise this one is going to be a bit much. See how that just straightens out? I'm going to try to leave a little of that curl though. Let's get another nice little one in here. See if we can just thin this out as we draft. And let's just get right into just the lock by itself. And then some lock with some roving. And leave some of that curl. And leave some of that curl. And as you can see, you can get quite a lot of texture in there. You have to be a little more careful. I have to pay much more attention because I'm not as used to spinning a finer, smaller, thinner textured yarn. But look at that. That's probably ideal right there. You know, look at lots of texture in there. It's really very pretty. Let's see if you can see it on on the black, maybe a little bit better. You know, but that's great, a nice amount of texture there. You can also, let's see, if we're not going to take this down quite so far, I'm going to go back to this nice clump. I like this kind of fiber because it just falls apart. These larger curls are really fun to work with, so I'm going to take a handful of those, and let's see if we can come up a little less fine with a little more texture. Again, I'm putting quite a bit of twist in this because this is going to be applied yarn. And I'm going to probably sort of go back and forth here between a little bit of roving going in and a little bit of lock going in. Okay. Okay. If I feel like the texture of the yarn is getting, or the weight of the yarn is getting too heavy and too thick, I'll probably back off a little on the roving and just go down with the... Okay. Now sometimes I feel like I'm straight lock spinning, which is just basically pulling it forward this way and letting the locks go in. Other times I feel like I want to spin from the right. I want to core it a little bit, kind of let it wrap around, and you just have to experiment with what you like, you know, and how much texture or how much space you want between your other little poofs of lock.